This is a Bergen Film Club podcast.
Like an old movie removed from the frame, I am floating and looking for someone to blame. Won't you project me on the walls of your heart? I'm waiting for the real thing to start.
Hello and welcome to The Real Thing. Very nice to have you back. I'm your host, Joe Lawrence, reporting live from Svalbard at the top of the world in the intense cold and polar bear ridden countryside. But nonetheless, I will keep the podcast going no matter where I am. This podcast is an extension of Bergen Film Club's program, where we explore the themes and ideas in the films that are specifically curated by the Film Club's board every semester. And today we have a great film, as always, one from last semester, so from 2023 though. And with us today we have expert on films, I believe, and the selector of the film that we're talking about today. Hello, Hanne.
Hi, nice to be with you virtually, even though you're all the way in Svalbard, which is impressive.
Yeah, it's I'm having like pinch me moments multiple times a day. It's kind of, I can't believe that I'm in the Arctic Circle, podcasting from the Arctic Circle.
The Norwegian dream.
Yeah, it's very cool here. It's like, it's really very strange, I think. The vibe is weird, and the countryside is just like shocking and really impressive and kind of scary, but it's cool, and everyone is super nice here. So
impressive and scary and nice. That is kind of what I expected of Svalbard.
Yeah, I'm kind of the threat of polar bears is kind of on my mind a lot, but other than that, it's gonna be a cool stay, I think. But yes, today we are talking about the 1985 classic, Criterion Channel classic, Tampopo. But before we get into that, let's start with some recommendations, as we always do. So if, Hanne, you have any that you want to share with us, then I am all ears.
I do, of course. For those who don't know me, I am a Bergen Film Club alum. But it will always be in my heart. So I was obviously there and watched the film recently. And fittingly, all my recommendations this week are Japanese, of course, not only because the movie we're talking about is Japanese, but because statistically it's likely that something amazing will be Japanese. So it only makes sense. But we watched Tokyo Story by Yoshiro Ozu, and that really made me want to talk to people about another film he made, which is called Good Morning, which is about two little boys who tell their parents they will keep a vow of silence until they buy them a television. From 1959, it's really nice. It's really sweet, but it also tackles those typical Japanese themes of modernity and American influence. So that is super nice. Also Drive My Car, which we're showing at the library next week. That is based on the novel of Haruki Murakami, so that's out from 2021. So if you want something that's slightly nearer than 1959, that is a wonderful, one of my favorite new films. That's like a jazz record you play at night. It's slow but beautiful. A very lovely watch for those who haven't seen it already.
Wow, quite the recommendation. That sounds great. I haven't seen it yet, but I look forward to it for sure. I'm kind of curious, though. are you a Haruki Murakami fan? Do you like his books? What's your opinion?
It's controversial these days because he's kind of being reconsidered now because, for one thing, he very often centers men in his stories, and the women in his stories are often quite fetishized, or there'll be some, reflection on female characters' breasts seemingly to appear out of nowhere.
Yes.
But my controversial answer is still yes, I am kind of a fan, because he really brought kind of magical, not just magical realism, but the idea that there could be magical elements in writing to the mainstream. And I think he has also made people read Japanese writers more. So
Definitely.
I would still not cast him aside completely. I do see those things, absolutely. But there is still something unique about him. I say read him and then also read all the amazing female writers like Yuko Agawa, Mieko Kawakami. Just the more the merrier, really.
Yeah, I've very boringly only read Norwegian Wood, but I did find those bits kind of like stand out, maybe unnecessary. But I've been reading books by Ryu Murakami, who I don't think has any relation to Haruki. But I've loved his books. His books are Piercing and Audition are the two that I read, which is the inspiration behind the cult classic film. But I really like his books because I feel like he gives a proper I feel like sometimes Japan can be sold as kind of this perfect utopian society where nothing is wrong. But in fact, maybe it does have this sort of seedy underbelly where there is a lot of men acting particularly terribly. And Ryu Murakami isn't afraid to sort of highlight those themes in his books. And especially in Audition. So the perverse story contrast. But I enjoyed his books at least more than the one Haruki Murakami book because I felt like he was, even though it's obviously like a fictional fanciful story, it still gave a more of a real reflection of what I think Japan is actually like.
But I think maybe that's the interesting part of it is that Norwegian Wood kind of rocketed to fame, but it doesn't necessarily represent his writing. It's the odd one out in a way. But the aforementioned objectification still definitely exists in the weirder ones. So that doesn't go away. But I would say Kafka on the Shore, probably my favorite. And then his short story collections are, for the movie fan, the perfect thing because they're super cinematic. You can read a short story at a time. Men Without Women, The Elephant Vanishes. Those always gonna put in some literature recommendations too. You can't ask anything else of a librarian.
Yeah. Well, speaking of literature recommendations, that's what I was going to recommend today, actually, on my behalf. The only film recommendation that I have is that I watched Antiviral yesterday, which is one of Brandon Cronenberg's first films. And it is centering around a company that sells diseases that celebrities have to the common man. And obviously you can expect no less than of a Cronenberg, that it's extremely uncomfortable. Since it was one of his first films, it's quite low budget-esque, and it's kind of reflective of a Black Mirror episode almost. But really great lead. I audibly said, "Ew, that's so gross," out loud in my room on my own, because it was gross. But like a very on the nose commentary on society's obsession with celebrities, but nonetheless, it was a pretty good, like standard good film. But I've seen Possessor by Brandon Cronenberg, and I also quite like that. So that was a fun concept, and I'm dying to see Infinity Pool.
I'm surprised you haven't jumped on it yet, being horror fan.
I am a horror fan, and I'm also a Mia Goth super fan.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's crazy to me that I haven't seen it, but it's definitely on my watch list. But for my book recommendation, it's also relating to an upcoming film, which I believe will be possible to see in Bergen in the coming months, is the Alistair Gray novel Poor Things, which is being adapted into a film by Yorgos Lanthimos. Without being too dramatic, I think if it keeps going well, this might be my favorite book that I've ever read.
That's big.
Yeah, it is big. Yeah, I just I can't get enough of it, and I'm sad at the concept that I'm going to finish it. Um, so it's following this doctor in Scotland who befriends this super weird guy who's also a doctor at his university, who has reanimated a woman's body after he found a woman who committed suicide. And it's like a little bit, at times it can be sort of a bit seedy and creepy, because the kind of concept is this woman who they don't know the history of was with child at the time that she committed suicide, and he transplants the child's brain into the woman, and then he raises her as like a 25-year-old child. And the whole book is about him teaching her how to experience life, and about her first loves and her first experiences with food and seeing the world. But the character Bella Baxter, who will be played by Emma Stone in the film, is just such like an exciting and peppy and fun character. And it's like really interesting as she's sort of like coming into her own knowledge of like seeing the person who she's going to be, and she's like breaking men's hearts left, right, and center. And it's just a thrill to read. It's like really well written, and it's making me even more excited for the film. So that's my recommendation, is that Poor Things.
That sounds amazing, and it also sounds like Lanthimos is the perfect director for it.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's some he's like telling a story of different animals that he's reanimated, and just kind of trying out different combinations of animals and stuff. So I think, yeah, he's going to do a great job. It's Willem Dafoe is playing the creepy doctor. Emma Stone, as I said, and Rami Youssef, I believe, is the name of the lead actor, and then also Mark Ruffalo is playing the like debonair, fiendish man who steals Bella Baxter away. So I think it's great casting, and I can't wait. So that's going to be good.
I'm gonna haunt the Bergen Channel website for the screening time.
Oh yeah. Well, that was the most literary recommendation that I think that we've ever done, but great all the same. But how about we just jump in, start talking about the main attraction of this episode, which is Tampopo.
Let's do it.
So this is a Japanese comedy film and genre defined as being a ramen western, directed by Juzo Itami in 1985. So quickly, I'll just define what a ramen western is. It is basically a play on the concept of a spaghetti western, which was these bunch of films which were western inspired and styles that were produced in Europe, and particularly were produced and directed by Italians or filmed in Italy. So, for example, we have Sergio Leone, who was reckoned as a pioneer in this genre and made the Dollars trilogy, which was Fistful of Dollars for a few dollars more in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So when that was taken by Juzo to adapt that into a Japanese film, obviously we got a ramen western, which is very fun. So you chose this film for Bergen Film Club's program. last semester. So do you want to give it a little introduction and maybe talk on why you decided to choose this film?
I will. So as you said, it's directed by Juzo Itami. And it came out in 1985, which was an amazing year for movies. But this movie is a hodgepodge of so many genres that are really defined genres in themselves, but it takes them and makes it appropriately into a tasting menu of them. We meet two truck drivers who stop late night at a ramen joint, Goro and Gun, and they find the ramen so-and-so, but their meeting with the owner, Tampopo, inspires them to go on this odyssey quest of learning the art of noodle making.
Mm-hmm.
And that is kind of the main story of it, even though that doesn't in any way explain how rich that story is. But it also is infused with all these vignettes centered around food. So the film is kind of never static. It opens with a fourth wall break where they talk about etiquette in the cinema, which is absolutely classic, and I think we should have as an opening vignette at BFK someday. I would love that. Yep. And other vignettes like that include a spaghetti eating course for Japanese women, and a woman squeezing all the fruits in the store.
Yeah.
And then my favorite and everybody's favorite, of course, the erotic food scene, which iconically includes the passing of an egg yolk that stays intact from mouth to mouth. So the Tampopo story, the art of ramen, is mirrored through all these smaller stories that are kind of comedy, also gangster, Yakuza stories that got him in trouble later. I'm sure we'll come back to that. And then just kind of art house in the sense that it's this explosion of little treats that are somehow tied together. So I think I chose it because it's kind of impossible to walk away from this film feeling anything other than joy. I've never met anyone that didn't enjoy this movie, and I've never met anyone that didn't feel hungry. So it's just a unique party. That's what it is.
A little anecdote from when we showed it at BFK is that our most recurring guest of the podcast, Bendik, had to leave the screening midway through because he was so hungry. He had to go get something to eat.
I think before seeing it, I was warned that I should either not be hungry or have ramen, which is awful because we actually don't have decent ramen in Bergen, which I know there's one day going to be a mass movement to change.
Definitely.
Yeah, but it's it has a lot of wonderful things going for it, but it's also just one of those perfect BFK films because it's a cult classic and it can go under the radar sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Just to touch on that a little bit, is that when I was reading about sort of the legacy and the reception of it, is obviously, like you said, now we revere it as a cult classic, and it even has in the past, I think it was 2016, it got a 4K restoration through Criterion. But initially, when it was released in Japan, it wasn't all that well received. It was considered a flop in the Japanese box office. But then when it was released in the States, I think 2 years later, then that's when it sort of came to commercial and critical success?
Maybe it's because it does borrow quite heavily from Western film traditions, which is interesting in terms of what you said about noodle ramen. And what I find so amazing about that term is that the so-called spaghetti Westerns, they borrowed so much from Japanese cinema, especially Sergio Leone. He copied Akira Kurosawa's Yojimbo and Seven Samurai to define the genre. So I feel like the ramen Western is a bit of a reclamation of that, but at the same time, it uses Western elements. So it just becomes a big kind of circle now, you know?
Yeah, it's like a full circle moment, except they don't remember where they started, almost.
No.
Yeah.
That's postmodernism for you.
I had never even heard of this film before I saw it at BFK. But it was great. It was a treat to watch, honestly. Like you said, you can only kind of smile and have a good time when you're watching it. I think I also watched it yesterday, and I was mentioning that I had some notes that I made whilst I was watching it. But I think one of my main notes is that it has all of the gravitas and all of the kind of stress and drama of a Western, but with like zero stakes. It's like nothing bad is going to happen if it doesn't work out, but you feel like they build up the scene like of her cooking the broth, for example, as if it's like the most important thing on the planet. And he has this really great score accompanying the entire film that makes it feel like this huge, monumentous, scary moment, but she's just cooking. But cooking can feel like that sometimes.
There's a humorous element to that as well, right? Because ramen is everywhere in Japan. So the fact that they're making this great effort to teach her to make ramen, even though realistically you'd find it on the next corner too, is kind of amazing. And as you say, making a meal can be easy, but on the wrong day it can be really hard. And Tampopo is a widow, you know, she's making ends meet for her son, and those are the kind of situations where actually making a meal can be the last straw, really.
Yeah, like it almost is life and death in this situation, and if she doesn't pull through, then how is she going to be a success? But I just love Tampopo as a kind of, I guess she's sort of the protagonist, but I just think she's such a fantastic protagonist and such a like joy to watch her, kind of excitement and pure joy of going through this whole experience, kind of claiming who she already was. And that's really just a testament to the actress, Nobuko Miyamoto. I think she plays it so well. You really, from the second that you meet her, you're like in love with her and want to see her succeed and do well.
Yes, and everyone loves a good makeover story, even though they keep it strictly to the ramen shop, no salon treatment, as far as I can remember. But we love those stories, you know?
Big time. That's that is one of my guilty pleasures, like the show Queer Eye, for example. I'm like not paying attention all episode until they do like the hair reveal, the house reveal. Then I'm like, okay, this is the best thing ever. So it's like great to see that in a film. And I think towards maybe in the last 40 minutes of the film, when she has her new outfit that they choose for her, which is this big chef hat, and Gun, who's sort of the guy leading her through this story, says, you look like a French chef. I almost want to call you Jean. And like, that's kind of like a mini makeover, I guess. But That's great. I love the relationship that is sort of like almost played off in a romantic way, but it's never like a real plight or focus of the film. That it's just kind of like almost like a strictly professional relationship.
I think these physical elements are representations of the inner journey, which, you know, it's food that that makes that come to fruition. It's the kind of social glue and the social divider, because you wouldn't put these characters together, or you wouldn't picture them together in a lineup, but then they come together through this mission. But I thought something I'll never forget is we did a volunteer screening of Tampopo before a long time ago. And Vinay Chambor and Kenneth Sjövold, Vinay is still in the board, Kenneth was then, one of them said, you know, the film is amazing, but it's basically a long mansplain of making ramen. And, you know, they're kind of quite literally correct. But, you know, I didn't think of it that way. It's a lot of fun, but I must credit them with that amazing analysis, because
definitely.
It's on point.
Yeah, I think it's like nuanced mansplaining.
Absolutely. It's mansplaining with heart, which maybe even isn't mansplaining at all.
It's just explaining.
Yeah. Something like that. But I thought food is the penultimate food movie. He even starts by saying what you're eating. And then that kind of comes back. And one of my big loves with this film is, you know, food as something erotic. And even though nothing happens between the characters, or at least not the main characters, it still is kind of charged. And, you know, chocolate and oysters are meant to be the great aphrodisiacs. There's forbidden fruit. There's Stanley Tucci's Instagram, where he's making the most amazing farfalle in the most erotic way. But I feel like not enough movies tap into this erotic potential of food, but this movie really does, and you'll never forget the very creative ways of using food for that purpose in this. There are some other examples, but it was done to perfection here.
Absolutely. The scene of them, like you said, passing the egg yolk between their mouth, is like, if you would describe that just with words, I feel like you would think that's gross, or it's like, why would anyone do that? But kind of when you watch it in the scene, it is like charged, and it is kind of erotic in a way, which is strange when you actually think about it. But like in the moment of it, you think like food is kind of sexy in a way. It makes you think about it in that perspective, which I don't necessarily think that a lot of people would do.
I think it definitely awakens that thought and that experience. And then you have Mexican film like Water for Chocolate, for example, that's based on a novel. In that one, there is the protagonist finds a way to infuse the food she prepares with her emotions. And it's a nice little tie to that, because even though the erotic, you know, smearing of various edible substances on bodies that may or may not happen in Tampopo. If you haven't watched it, you definitely should now, hearing this. That is, you know, one type of love. And then it shows other types of love. The housewife that gets out of bed on her deathbed to prepare a last meal. Or mother breastfeeding. So it is the erotic aspect, but there's also just food and love and nurture, you know, food as a symbol of care.
I read Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner, lead singer of Japanese Breakfast, who I am a huge fan of. Or at least the year that it came out. And I think that's what really started my thinking of food in a different way, and especially then kind of spookily continued through watching this film many years later. But she wrote, in the context of her having like a difficult relationship with her mother, that food was sort of like the great equalizer in their relationship, that there was always this level of judgment from her mother for various reasons. But when it came to eat, then there's no like aversion there. It's just we both need to eat and we both have respect for each other eating. And it's like, I think that was kind of mind-changing for me in a really big way, and through this film as well, that I think you kind of forget in a way that food is ultimately what can connect every single person in the whole world. Like, everyone eats, everyone gets together and has lunch, for example. Like, you wouldn't think about that, say, if you're at work, you're all on your lunch break together, all connected through this moment that I think can be forgotten about. It's like something to really, it brings moments to appreciate and to share. And I think that's just a really special thought that this kind of sings through this whole film, is especially at the end when they all take the last drink of the ramen together after Tampopo finally like perfects the recipe. It's just like, yeah, that food allows these moments of connection and of perfection and stuff. I just think it's really special and lovely to see it like outlined in a film like this.
I think that's a really, really excellent point, and it doesn't stand alone either. In Tokyo Story, it's a big thing when, because it's about parents who visit their children in Tokyo, but then they end up being neglected by all of them. It's a film that really makes you want to call your parents. But in that film, there's a moment where one of their daughters' husband says, I brought bean cakes today. And she says, oh, they don't need that. Rice cakes is enough for them. And it makes you really sad. You're like, you want them to have the special bean cakes. It definitely means something. It's also in the Ghibli movies, it's a very big thing. All those amazing fried eggs and those ramen bowls, and also more sadly in Grave of Fireflies, which is set during Second World War, when the kids have to really fight for their rice.
Yeah. Well, I was just exactly going to talk about the Ghibli films just briefly. That just thinking about what we were just talking about, that if I really think about what those moments of the food kind of represent, I can think in Ponyo, for example, that time where they have that special meal is like kind of a calming moment after the whole world floods. And in Howl's Moving Castle, when they have breakfast together, that's the first time that they all kind of begin this family that they have together, and it's all set around a breakfast table. So yeah, I think I'm just going to be thinking about every film that I've watched ever, and if there are these like special moments based around food, and could they only be based around having a meal together?
there is something to it, and maybe especially because it's so important in Japanese cinema, where it's something the characters use to connect. And then you think of the American tradition of TV dinner, and the contrast becomes pretty apparent.
Yeah, just like Matilda just came to mind, I guess. Is that the whole the kind of complete separation and ignorance of that family is completely exemplified in them sitting completely blind to each other, watching TV, eating their kind of like microwave dinner together.
Definitely something to look out for. But in the case of Tampopo, there's also a huge meal being consumed in the cinema. So I guess that'll be allowed.
Yeah, but I love that, like, I love the beginning so much. I think it's just it's like a great little like jab to have it people about cinema etiquette. And I also specifically remember someone was eating like chips during the Tampopo screening, and it was like driving me crazy because they were sitting right at the back, just rustling through their bag, and I was like, "Ooh, that's so annoying."
Quite important to people to have the isolating experience, to be kind of alone with the film. And it would be really amazing to show that scene, because you need to be aware that you're around other people, and it's definitely a breach of the cinema contract. I'm not saying don't bring a snack, but maybe choose your snack wisely, I'd say. We don't show many movies with lots of explosions, so you can't hide your snacking in them.
That's very true. My approach is whatever you brought, you have to eat as much of it during a trailer period, and then no more food when the film starts.
I think we have a similar strategy then.
Yeah. You have to like pound through the popcorn, and then the film starts and you put it down.
Either that or create a very elaborate system where everything is as accessible as possible. Now it sounds like we're going to kill someone who shows up with a bag of crisps, but we won't take it that.
No. No. Maybe next time, but not yet. Just very morbid little transition there, but since you were talking about killing, I thought we could briefly mention a kind of almost true crime element to the history of this film's director.
Briefly.
Yeah. So, Juzo Itami, he made 11 films, I believe. He directed 11 films after he stopped being an actor, which I believe was when he turned 50. So Nobuko Miyamoto, who I mentioned, is also the star of this film, and she's great, is his wife, and she was the star, or at least a main role, in all of his films. She was like, he had kind of a rolling cast of actors who he used in almost all of his films, like Christopher Nolan. But I just wanted to point out that she's brilliant in this film, and then one of his most acclaimed films, A Taxing Woman, which I think won 6 Japanese Academy Awards. She won Best Actress in that film. And that's kind of like a neo-noir about a female detective going through, I think, following some cases of murders through the like love hotels in Japan. I saw some clips of it and it looks pretty good. So I'll definitely be watching that. So obviously, I think you can tell from this, because even though it's seriously sold at the root of the film, it's pretty silly. I think Tampopo, it's kind of, I was thinking yesterday, it's almost, some of the stuff that happens is almost reminiscent of like the Airplane, kind of those 3 films, like Top Secret and the other one. So he's like not afraid of satire. He's not afraid to make real punchy comedy or commentaries on things. But this is actually what ended up getting him in a lot of trouble later in his life. I think Tampopo might have been one of his last films, and the film that he made after this was a kind of a satirical comedy about the Yakuza, which was a very large gang movement in Japan through the latter half of the 20th century. And this basically brought up a lot of anger from the Yakuza. They said, hey, please stop making fun of us, or we will kill you. To which he responded by making another Yakuza comedy film, which then, unfortunately, in 1997, Tom was declared dead after he was found having fallen from a building, which his office was at, with a suicide note saying he'd been falsely accused of having an affair, and he did it to clear his name. It was like a big kind of celebrity scandal almost. He's like this huge director, and his wife is a huge actress, so attached to this was a whole load of like a media circus. However, everyone was kind of aware of this, so I think the gang was kind of a division of Yakuza group called Gotogumi. And then many years later, in 2008, a former member of this group said that we set it up to stage his murder as a suicide. We dragged him up to a rooftop, put a gun in his face. We gave him a choice: jump and you might live, or stay and we'll blow your face off. He jumped. He didn't live.
Absolutely horrible.
I know.
And he did kind of call his style, even in Tampopo, criticism through humor.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of sad to think that someone, or the accuser specifically, would take that humorous portrayal of them so very, very seriously. And even in Tampopo, there is some gangster plot that we haven't talked that much about, but it's very much there. And the accuser are still a huge taboo in Japan, but it definitely shows his boldness in expressing these things.
Yeah, that just him kind of, after receiving that threat and still choosing to make this second film that's like very clearly about this kind of critique through humor. Yeah, he's incredibly bold and very, it's respectable in a way almost, that he's like obviously very defined in believing that obviously from such a corrupt establishment that he obviously believes shouldn't have such control over things like media or movies in Japan, almost above the government. So I think it was kind of an incredible thing to do and very respectable, and then just incredibly sad that such a great man's life had to come to an end in such a horrible way.
And who knows, he probably would have continued making movies. So I suppose we should be very grateful that we have the movies we have, and that he really made us, laugh, and really added something to cinema as well. And I think that even though he had that end, it is kind of comforting, especially the afterlife of Tampopo, which is, being restored and re-released and really hailed as the penultimate movie within what it's doing,
Yeah. Yeah. Just fantastic film, fantastic guy. Yeah. Well, I guess all I can say is thank you for putting it on the program, because I don't think that I would have really come across it otherwise.
My absolute 100% pleasure.
In fact, a couple of days ago, a friend of mine asked me what to watch, because he was having a free evening, and I was like, you have to watch Tampopo because you're going to love it. And then, 2 hours later, I get a message from him, and it said, what a fucking recommendation. So,
and the film torch passes on.
Yeah, on and on. I have to give you your props though, because it came from you, and I'll keep spreading the word.
You do that. It's the best part of BFK. It's our big public sharing forum of great cinema, and that was one of the last films I put up, but also, dare I say, one of the best.
Yeah. You definitely had some great ones in there, but I think maybe Tampopo was my favorite, at least.
That's great.
Contrastingly, I have my first film in the program coming up, which is very exciting.
It is? Which one is that?
I Am Not Madame Bovary.
I'm looking forward to that one, and I have not seen it, so that will be on my list.
Great. I'm interested to see how the projection side of it will go, because it has a very peculiar aspect ratio. It's a circle. So, but very exciting. I have 2 films, and I can't wait for people to watch them.
It's going to be a great term all around. So
yeah, definitely.
I hope everyone listening either are members or sing locally.
Yeah. Well, I think we're at the end of this episode, so thank you so much for being on. This has been a really great discussion. I've very much enjoyed talking about this film with you.
Me too.
Yeah. And as Hanne said, if you are living in Bergen, willing and able, please consider being a volunteer at Bergen Film Club. And if not, just please come see one of our films. We would love to have you. But yeah, thank you again. And goodbye.
Bye.
This has been a Bergen Film Club production. Our music is by Wise John. Check them out on Instagram at WISEJohnOfficial. Our logo is by Pia Sofia Brentersen. This episode was produced, mixed and engineered by Joel Lawrence. Our researchers are Inke Shilbrai-Bern and Mamina Nazmajid. Want to talk to us about films? Then please send us an email at podcast@bergenfilmclub.com. Follow the show on Instagram and Twitter at TheRealThingPod. Check us out on Letterboxd at BFK The Real Thing. Thank you and goodbye. Listen, follow, leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, or wherever it is that you get your podcasts.